episodes. Let me ask you this. So you're a Notre Dame guy, right?
I am.
I keep hearing about Caleb Williams, and he wants part ownership. Like everyone tells me how good this guy is. I feel like it's like cake. Everyone tells me how good it is, but when I actually try it or see it, it does not live up to expectations. Let's just put it nicely. That's my view. As a Notre Dame guy, I would love to get your view on that.
Well, I guess I have to be fair because last year Caleb Williams looked like the greatest cake in the world against Notre Dame.
Right.
I think maybe his bakery helped. The bakery experience against Notre Dame helped maybe clinch that stiff arm trophy that he brought home. This Saturday night, it was a little bit of a different experience. I like to think the Irish defense helped compel some of the different looks of how Caleb looked Saturday night. Whether a young football player in college is done enough to earn ownership of an NFL franchise, I guess it's above my pay grade. But certainly, he's got great and grand ambitions in terms of his business interests. It would appear.
Well, Brady's got 6 Super Bowls, and he owns no percent of any team other than the ones he's purchased. So I don't. That's just a very like he'd have to have a game like he had last year, legitimately every single game with a guarantee of like multiple Super Bowls. And I don't know. That's a risky ask in my opinion. But the other thing is that we're seeing a lot of games in London. What's your take on an NFL team in Europe?
Wow. Again, a little above my pay grade in terms of, there's so many things that go into something like that. Again, and I'm just speaking almost as a sports fan of when you read those stories and you start to consider it, the logistics, but the world has changed. I mean, there was a time where, look at just the landscape of college sports, and the
Right.
conferences were set up with the logistics of geography in mind. Certainly geography is no longer the driving factor in that environment. So is it possible that whether it's today or 15, 10, 5, 1, 2, 3 years from now, geography, maybe technology enables it to happen? I think it doesn't seem impossible when you think about where we've been in the world of sports and where we are. And again, it seems as though from a business standpoint, expanding markets makes sense. You look at the world of when I was a kid, the English Premier League wasn't on. No one knew what that was.
That's
And
right.
it's a massive presence on all of our major networks now. So who's to say what could happen next?
No, I think it's necessary. I think he's smart to try to push it because you have to expand. People love the sport, and it's got to be more than once or twice a year. But I figure I throw a few football questions at you. I want to talk a little bit about the episodes in the series. I love it, Paul. I have to say, I love the way they're shot. As somebody who loves history, I love the idea that it's almost like you're watching a timeline of somebody's life, right? Like, so something that's 50 or perhaps 60 years in the making. I think it's really genius. I think it's really creative. I was a big fan of the sports centuries that came out on ESPN. I absolutely loved them, but this takes it to, I feel like, Paul, to a whole nother level.
I think it's wonderful to hear that. I appreciate the kind words, and really, it's kind words for the folks that came long before me at NFL Films, because one of the strengths of this series is leaning to our archive. We have this amazing partnership at MGM Plus that we've had for going on 6 years now. This is our 5th season with them, and that we just finished with Icons. And their president Michael Wright loves the NFL Films archive in a way that he gives us this amazing platform to stretch our legs as storytellers. So the shape that's taken on this most recent project we've done with them is using those archives. These are names of football players you've heard before. It's not like we're introducing you to someone you don't know if you're a football fan, but we have material that no one's ever seen just by virtue of how much we've covered them over the years. And as as a creator, even within this show, you have a certain time limit. Everything you do can't make every episode. But when you're shooting the likes of Jim Brown for 2-3 hours at a time over a 50-year period, inevitably there's material that we can now go back through the lens of time and unearth. And so you get to see not just hear stories that you've never heard before, but to your point about visuals, you get to see these guys age on screen.
Yeah.
In the case of Charles Woodson, the first interview we shot with him, I think he's 21 years old coming out of Michigan. I did the interview with him for this series this summer, and here he is, whatever it is, 30 odd years later.
Mm,
He looks different. Even just seeing the white creep into his beard in the interviews over the years.
yeah. Yeah.
So it creates a visual that underscores the storytelling perspective that we try to create, which I think helps give the series power, because you're creating a credibility of what the guy's voice has been throughout his entire life.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I don't know how to I don't know how to ask this question, but I'll try my best. You know, I feel like when kids go through school, there's certain historical figures that they have to know about. I hope the new generation of football fans, NFL fans, really know how vital Steve Sabol was to this whole freaking process. Like, this man is an icon and a legend. I hope people, the new generation, I know people my age and around my age and perhaps a little bit younger know, but I hope like the teenagers now and the younger kids, they know what this guy did for the NFL. Like, I hope they know.
Yeah, I mean, the body of work certainly, I think, stands for itself in that
Jeez.
it continues to demonstrate itself as like the gift that keeps on giving. You know,
Yes.
every interview they did, you know, a guy like Dick Buckus passed away a couple weeks ago, and suddenly all these the images of his bloody hands, you know, the clips of the interviews again of him, the sound bites, and everyone in our series, it's the same thing. You know, we have a history that lives and breathes and continues to give us an ability to learn from in a new way because of the work that Steve did. And really, it was just, you know, when you talk about the cliche of if you find the thing you love, you never work a day in your life. I mean,
Yeah.
I had the ability to work under Steve's watchful eye, and I really think he was an embodiment of that. He just loved, you know, I see all those movie posters behind you. Steve loved pro football and he loved the movies. Like, just
Yeah.
boil it down. And I think that, I mean, it was the foundation of his work. It was what made his work live and breathe. And I think it's what gives his work this longevity that, you know, we continue to benefit from as fans, certainly as creators. In the material he and his team bequested to us, and in the environment that they created, that we're able to continue to tell these great stories. And, you know, again, it's funny you meant the way you talk about kids, the quote kids today. We'll have young folks come in here out of college, and it's a reminder to us when there are things that you know, the Charles Woodson story is so much about the Tuck rule. Some of them weren't even alive when the Tuck rule happened in
Right,
2001.
right.
So they're learning these stories for the first time, which is a challenge and an opportunity to tell them in a new way to help them continue to live on and demonstrate how they're so universal. They're really human stories at the core of it.
Which adds to the importance of the NFL Icons episodes. You know, were you involved just with season 3 or all the seasons, Paul?
No, I've overseen the series for all 3 years. We our 4 episodes this year bring us up to 20 episodes altogether. So I was one of the I was a co-episode producer of John Madden, so I had my hands even further into the dirt on that one.
Yeah.
But I've overseen the series from the beginning, and so really have had the opportunity to work with some great producers here. You know, because again, there's the through lines of, like, you know, the names, you know, and there's this general idea of all the archives I point to, but everyone's a little bit different. Every story is a little bit different. And so how to really customize it, but within the framework of a series, is kind of the standing charge when you do a series like this.
Yeah, and I love the choices you guys. For those listening or watching on YouTube, you know, Favre, Emmett Smith, Vince Lombardi. This is season 1. Jerome Bettis, Steve Sable, Marcus Allen, Joe Namath. Season 2 was Madden, Peyton, Jimmy Johnson, Steve Young, Ray Lewis, Aikman, Tony Dungy, Chris Carter, and then we talk about the 4 this season: Jim Brown, Bill Cowher, Mike Singletary, and the last one is Charles Woodson, right?
Yes.
Yes. So how do you guys choose? I mean,
Hmm.
my God, I mean, talk about a responsibility. Like, you did a good job choosing, but like, how do you narrow it down?
There's no great satisfactory answer maybe for that one. It's every programming year is a little different. You know, we had 4 episodes. We certainly want to create kind of a diversity in terms of who the players were as football players, what they accomplished as you know, men, you know, what eras they played in. We have a head coach among the group. You know, we have people from different parts of the country. We have offensive players, defensive players. You know, in the case of Jim Brown, he passes away in the spring. In February, I think it was at NFL Honors. It was the NFL renames the running back award, the annual running back award, as the Jim Brown Trophy. I believe
Mm-hmm,
is the phrase. I don't want to get it wrong, but
mm-hmm.
so he's sort of in the news. Then he passes away in the spring. So again, it's sort of the natural flow of like, oh, you're almost reminded. You know, again, you're in NFL films. You sort of live in this pantheon of these images and stories every day, but that one sort of percolates back up, and you go, gee, we've never done a Jim Brown icons, and we haven't done a long Jim Brown treatment or film. And I think, you know, 7, 8 years, maybe it's time to revisit that story, because it's just like any study of history. Over time, perspectives change, new material comes to light. You know, when you're able to do a new interview with the folks who aren't, you know, Jim Brown posthumous, but the other ones we do new interviews, their perspective changes. So you get to gather new material and again refresh all the great raw, whether it's game footage or sound you've accumulated over the years, and you really get to see somebody in a new light. So it's sort of just it's almost like when they talk about the GMs who have that list in their drawer for the coaches that they would hire if they needed to, or
Right.
the players they would draft or acquire if they could. I mean, you sort of, as a movie maker or as a creator, you always have that list on your bulletin board of, gee, if I had a chance, I'm really interested. And again, it comes down to the individual filmmaker. Somebody might send us a pitch and go, you haven't talked about it, but this Charles Woodson story, let's not forget how amazing this
Mm.
guy was. It's time to
Mm.
bring him back up. So, I think there's sort of a natural curiosity that drives it, and then sort of what's happening in the world is certainly an influence.
Paul, what about lumping two personalities together? Like a Brady Belichick would be great. Like as somebody who lives in Massachusetts, I'm biased, but like I feel like they both have fed on each other, and maybe we're finding out now that one needed the other more than the other one needed the coach. But I don't know. What about the idea of lumping two together, or is storytelling just strictly, you think, let's just focus on one person, let's get this right? Plus, the way you guys do it, you're bringing up footage over the years, but I still think you could do that in a double person scenario.
I think, gee, you might have just pitched an entire new series. I think the beauty of icons is, again, these are massive figures in history.
Right.
And I think in the 45 to 50 to 52-minute range, certainly all the guys have enough material for that. The irony actually is sort of the inverse. A guy like Jim Brown in particular, I kept saying it as we were doing the film, he's lived 3 films worth of life. He was
Mm.
an icon as a football player, an icon as a groundbreaking Hollywood actor, and an icon as an American civil rights activist.
Yeah.
Lived 80 plus years, changed all these lives. Certainly had challenges, so some of them self-imposed, as he talks about in the film. I think often, actually, the challenge is, how do we boil it down to demonstrate how, we sometimes use the phrase, we want to be an inch wide and a mile deep. We want to go really into the corners of what made these people tick, and get into it as if you're taking a college class on the subject when you watch this hour film.
Yeah, MGM Plus is developing one hell of a catalog of shows. Yeah, so is we're leaving it at 4 for season 3 and then season 4, or is it just the first 4 that dropped and then we're releasing more? How does that work, Paul?
So season 3 this season is just 4 episodes. It's just
Okay.
kind of again the way it worked out, and we're optimistic that there's an opportunity to do more going forward. We've had a really good run with icons. Again, a great relationship with MGM Plus. We used to do a topical in season show for them called NFL The Grind.
Yeah.
That transitioned after a couple of years into a little bit more of an evergreen historical show in NFL icons. And we've gotten good feedback. We've had a lot of fun doing them. Again, they're challenges as storytellers to have sort of that familiar surprise of a name, but how can you learn something about them and hopefully teach the audience something about them that they've never seen before.
Paul, if you had to choose a couple names, if you just had to, I mean, I'm not holding you to this, I'm not guaranteeing it. Who would you put in for season 4? Who would you like to see? If it was just solely up to you, it was 100% your decision. Not saying these are the only people you'd like, but maybe that you're partial to.
Yeah, I love, and one of the questions we get is, well, they have to be Hall of Famers, right? And the answer is no. I mean, I think there's guys that aren't in the NFL Pro Football Hall of Fame that would be worthy of an icon stream. And again, I think one of the things you got to remember with this series is we are so built and gifted by the archives. There are people that we've covered the heck out of and interviewed the heck out of over the years that I'd love to give this treatment to. I always think back to Don Meredith. Again, precedes me a little bit in terms of he was before my time.
Right.
But again, a guy who was a foundational cowboy, sort of a folk hero type figure in the way that Earl Campbell was, coming out of East Texas, then goes to SMU, becomes one of the first Cowboys, a pioneer on Monday Night Football, just a larger than life character. Again, like John Madden, like Troy Aikman, these guys that, like Jim Brown, has these multiple lives all within this football universe that I think would be really cool to bring his story to this series.
Pat Summerall too would be terrific.
That's another great example. Again, even those are the challenges of a guy that's even further back in his playing career than even Jim Brown was. But yes, Summerall, gosh, what he was as an early broadcaster, it's to your point, like you want people to appreciate what, the history that came before you.
Yeah.
Because the players and the broadcasters in the football world of today sort of all are built upon their foundation.
Yeah, that's what the show does. It's terrific. My last question for you is, so you have a really solid bed of experience here. You did a football life, you did Hard Knocks. I have to say, Hard Knocks, even though it's not MGM Plus show. I think it adds to NFL, and I think it adds to this show on MGM Plus. One of the greatest shows I love watching at Hard Knocks. I mean, my wife watches it with me. I mean, it is a great show. What is the appeal of Hard Knocks? Is it the honesty, you think? Is it what is the appeal?
I think there's a couple things that make Hard Knocks pop. I mean, it's been on for over 20 years now. It's one of our longest running shows, one of the longest, the biggest reaches in terms of audience. I think it's the in real time nature of it. It is the amount of coverage and documentation that's captured and then turned around so quickly. I think it's got that topical, almost not live, of course, but you're watching history unfold in real time sort of energy to it. Of course, the intensity and the stakes of an NFL training camp. And I think the third thing is, as much as, and it's not that it's the first NFL film show to do this, but the humanity that it captures, again, it goes back to Steve's sort of realization and drive to tell the stories of football players as humans, as brothers, as sons, as fathers. Again, the way the coaches have to be teachers. And I think Hard Knocks getting into the sort of bunker of an NFL team, and especially in a training camp, although we have the in-season Hard Knocks as well, so it's not just confined to the summer.
Right.
I think it gives you access into a world that's got a lot of intensity to it, but also a lot of humanity. And I think it shows you what kind of makes these guys tick in a way, and again, in a real-time way, that you're sort of getting the best of both worlds, the depth of a embedded documentary, but the turnaround of things. You're reading about these players, these events, and these games in the news, and you're watching on Hard Knocks within a week of what was really going on.
Right.
So there's sort of this double payoff you get in a series like that. And I think, again, to your point, like, we probably have, again, I don't know the numbers or the stats, but I think that show has as wide of a demographic reach in terms of ages, men, women, kids, all of it. Like, people seem to flock to Hard Knocks in a greater with a greater diversity than maybe anything that we do.
Which is what you want, right? Which is what you want. Let me ask this one last question. Oh, who do you cheer for?
So I'm born and raised a Giants fan. I'm from upstate New York.
Yeah.
You can see the Albany, New York skyline behind me back there.
I got you. Okay.
So yeah, I'm a Giants fan. I was again gifted with, and when I was 6 years old, the Giants won the Super Bowl in '86. Had a great run, of course, under Parcells, so it was all very good. And really, I've seen them win 4 and been to 5 in my lifetime. So yeah, they're my team from way back.
How is Lawrence Taylor not the first name out of your mouth? Like, talk about a guy that deserves one, the best defensive player in the history of the league. Oh my goodness. I mean, no question. Danny Dimes gave him too much money, I think.
Well, time will tell. It's only halfway through the season. It's a long season. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it's a terrific show for those listening. NFL icons. I enjoy it a lot, and I love the way it's told over the historic nature. You're watching, like you mentioned, Woodson. You see the gray in his beard. It's almost like looking at Facebook memories, and it's like, oh my God. But it's so educational. It's so historic, and for anybody who's an NFL fan, I can't imagine why they wouldn't be watching this. This is just such must-see TV. Paul, you are amazing at what you do, and thank you for coming on the show today.
Derek, I appreciate the time, and thanks for spreading the word about icons.
Yeah, take care. Thank you.